Retreat! Retreat! Ah!
Shulk, Dunban, Rhine, and all of their compatriots are still at war with the Mechon in Xenoblade Chronicles. This is the definitive edition for Nintendo Switch. Nintendo sent me out a review code to check this out. I've played this game a couple times before. I played it on the Wii, which is sitting in here somewhere. Everything's out of order. Nothing's alphabetized. And then over the wall, I've got the new 3DS version of the game, and I enjoyed them both times before. It was a mind-blowing game on the Wii, and if everybody can remember Operation Rainfall, this sort of crowdsourced call to arms to bring over Japanese games to North America, was successful in bringing Xenoblade Chronicles to our shores, and it was a phenomenal Wii game, and it was an unbelievable technical achievement for the new 3DS. And of course, the developers at Monolith didn't want to rest on their laurels, so they went back and redid a whole bunch of great art assets for this. It's not quite a remaster, but it's close to a remaster of Xenoblade Chronicles from the Wii. It looks better, it's at a higher resolution. It might not be the best looking of all the big RPGs that now exist comfortably on the Nintendo Switch, but it's still pretty damn solid looking. But where you're going to notice big jumps in detail is in all of the facial modeling and the animations in the faces particularly, but also just in the details. You feel a lot more sort of emotional connection to the way that these characters are animated, and there's a huge effort on the part of the game makers here to celebrate the cut sequences and the story bits. You can even go into a theater and sort of re-watch some of these epic moments played out again. There's also a gameplay element there where you have these memories, these quiet heart-to-heart kind of moments where a couple of characters will meet in specific spots and they will interchange some dialogue and you'll get to know them a little bit better. So there's a really big emphasis on storytelling, and obviously the game makers really wanted to go the extra level to make that storytelling shine a little bit more on the Nintendo Switch. There's no getting away from the fact that there's some creaky architecture in here, though. This definitely does feel like kind of like a bridge game from the PS2 era of majestic RPGs like Final Fantasy XII to what we're kind of seeing now with epic games like, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 or The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild or Persona 5. I mean, what we're seeing now is utterly mind-blowing. And unfortunately for Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, we've just had a string of excellent games like Final Fantasy VII Remake and Persona 5, and so it feels a little anachronistic to go back in time like this and to get into the play of this game, although I think the story really does hold up. I did find that the combat mechanics, which I think I was a little bit more forgiving of when I reviewed the original, and definitely more forgiving of when I could play this giant game on my my little 3DS. They feel a little bit more creaky and cumbersome today in 2020. As I'm getting into battles and I'm watching the meters on my different moves kind of replenish, it feels a little ridiculous that I'm just looking at the little sort of combat bar at the bottom where I can activate all my arts. And Shulk has some really cool techniques and some like a backslash or stab attacks, or he eventually, spoiler alert, but I think you know because the sword is prominently featured in here, gets to wield this awesome sword called the Monado that gives him all kinds of great new abilities. But watching all of those abilities kind of come back to life and let you use them becomes a little bit tedious because you spend more time looking at the bar watching little meters tick up than you do actually watching the combat unfold and these cool animated bits of characters attacking and shooting and slicing and dicing or blocking using shields and all that stuff. You're just not even focused on that because you're just focused on what can I press now? What can I activate now? It's a little bit like an MMORPG, which I'm sure I've talked about in previous reviews of Xenoblade Chronicles. And in the context of an MMO where it's a little bit more languid, the pacing, and you can kind of just sit back and it's more just about sort of community and sharing, you can find a little bit more peace with that. When you're playing a single player experience like this, there's a tedium that starts to sort of unfold with the combat. And unfortunately, that is absolutely the case. I found myself trying not to get into too many battles. I went for the signature battles, the important battles, or the sort of the mission-based battles. I didn't do much grinding in this game, maybe to my detriment, because that's the other thing that happens with this title. There is a bit of a disconnect from that immediate burst of information about what exactly I did wrong for me to die and have to face this beast again. And it was frustrating. It was frustrating at first because I felt incredibly underpowered. When I got the Monado as Shulk, again, spoiler if you don't want to know anything about this game, I felt much more powerful, and I was able to, hack and slash, and suddenly the fun meter went whoop, and I was starting to have a lot more fun again. But then there are choke points in this game, and because you're more focused on meters and what can I activate and can I chain everybody together and do an attack.
Take this! Right, you're up! Go!
For the most part, you're just sort of pressing buttons and watching to see that those animations happen, and you're not constantly kind of aware of your positioning on the battlefield, which is something that you have to do in this game. One of the moves that Shulk has is more effective if he is behind an opponent. So you do have to kind of know where you are in the battlefield, but because you're focused so much on that bar, sometimes stuff goes wrong, and, this character over here is dead, this character's dead, and then, whoa, oh, you're dead. And, you can revive them, you can heal them, and you can bounce back and forth, but it felt a little bit frustrating. And then, a few kicks at it, and eventually you can get past it. And if you just want to focus on the very cool story, you can play in casual mode and not really stress too much. But I felt like that line between, because I did try it once, I was getting my ass kicked by this monster, and I went, oh my god, okay, let's try casual. And I got past it, but it wasn't satisfying. It was too easy. So I feel like there is a perfect middle ground that may have been missed with the balancing in this game. And a lot of it has to do with the overabundance of mechanics and systems. There are reams and reams of pages of information that you can cycle through, talking about the affinities and positioning on the battlefield and when to strike and what to use. But in practice, when there is a real-time element, when you're in these battles, you're looking at the meters at the bottom of the screen. You're pressing the button on what you can use, and you're like, okay, let's get these big, giant tentacles that are coming at me with these snappy things. There's some satisfaction when you defeat these creatures, for sure, and you continue on, but it's not that same kind of elation that I've just been experiencing playing Final Fantasy VII Remake or Persona 5, And there's a bunch of other RPGs that I'm forgetting about right now, but it feels like we've had this nice string of really cool action-oriented role-playing games in the last little while. And this game, I think, still holds up, but it definitely feels a little creakier. And I think one of the major reasons why this game still holds up is that the story is very strong. This idea of Homs, these human-like people that live on Bionis, this giant frozen god that has been in battle with this giant mechanical god, Mechanus, and you've got these humans, these Homs, fighting these mechanical creatures, these mechons, which kind of ties into a lot of the same kinds of feelings that we have for things like Terminator or the Transformers. And the mechanical creatures are very cool, they're very well defined, there's some real menace projected in them. There's this amazing sequence at the beginning of relatively early in the game where the Mechon invade this colony and just devastate it, and it's pretty shocking. The stakes are high in the game, and that's, I think, one of the major attractions of this title, is that there are some pretty tragic things that happen, and they resonate, and they really matter. Shulk, who is this very cool chosen one type hero who has the ability and the affinity to utilize the Monado in some this blade weapon in some really incredible ways, and the Monado has all kinds of fantastic abilities. And I don't want to spoil too much, and I'm kind of dancing around a lot of stuff here, but one of the things that Shulk can do is he can see into the future. And that comes into play directly on the battlefield in those moments. Even though you're looking at the meters, you're still cognizant that when you get these flash forward sequences, you've got something that you got to do. And that's pretty damn cool. Consequently, you become really engaged with this character and the story that unfolds and the new characters that he encounters along the way and the escalation in this combat. The evil sort of qualities of the Mechon themselves, and this cool fusion of fantasy and science fiction. It works, And what we're talking 10 years later, it still works, and it's still a joy to kind of revisit. And so I think that this is a game for the super fans out there to re-experience the beauty of the story in the best way possible, right? Because I think that this is a favorite role-playing game for a lot of people out there, and they're going to enjoy the glorious new enhancements. And the other thing that's been added to this game is this whole epilogue moment, which is almost like a full game that is entirely brand new. It changes up some of the systems that you've learned in the game, and it employs some of the characters that you've gotten to know. It's a gift, really, for fans of this original game and for fans of this burgeoning series. This is a terrific game for those already established fans, but also Nintendo has been picking up new people along the way. A lot of people played Xenoblade Chronicles X on Wii U, probably not as many as that game deserved, and a lot of people played Xenoblade Chronicles 2 when it first hit the Switch in 2017, that epic launch year of the Nintendo Switch. And I think that there is a lot of people that are very curious to dive into this game for the first time, and I think you're going to have a terrific time. Now, technically and visually, it is not state-of-the-art, and if you know that going in, and you set your expectations sort of at an appropriate level, I think you are going to be very surprised and very pleased. I checked this game out on the big screen, on my 4K TV, and in handheld mode, and, although you can see the animations are a little bit, a little stiff, and not all of the hands and digits on the, especially the NPC characters are as articulated as what we're seeing in modern day RPGs. It still holds up. It still looks great. What really impressed me is the new attention to detail in the faces of the main characters and the storytelling elements that are there. I remain a giant fan of Xenoblade Chronicles, and I absolutely think it's a great pickup for the Nintendo Switch. I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10.